Now let's maybe just get a little bit of understanding about the role of the WTO. Is James Wise. He is the Senior Vice President at Height Consulting, and he is an expert on global trade matters. James Wise, thanks very much for being with us. Well, as the President just described the relationship between the United States and the World Trade Organization, maybe you could just offer us a little detail about what role the WTO plays, and do you believe what the President has described as a terrible relationship?
Sure. I mean, and thanks for having me on. I mean, the World Trade Organization, is the rules-based system for about 95% of world trade. So it is critically important for fostering continued economic growth around the world. The President's comments today, I think, are a continuation of what he's been saying all along, is he thinks American workers are getting a bad deal. And, they're going to look at ways to undo the WTO's power. And you look at the bill that was sort of leaked out today, it's just another example of how Trump is looking broadly at how to weaken the WTO.
Well, based on your experience, I mean, I believe you worked for Senator John Tester of Montana. You were chief of staff,
right.
Legislative director. You must have looked at this issue. Do you believe the United States is being treated unfairly by the World Trade Organization?
I think that there are certainly winners and losers in any trade environment. And I think what you're seeing is, I've heard in recent weeks from, for example, a D.C. representative of one of the big unions saying, his guys have thought they've been in a trade war for years. And just now, we're finally having somebody talk about how the United States is being victimized in the trade war. On the other hand, as you pointed out, I worked for a pretty rural state for a long time, and agriculture depends on U.S. agriculture depends on really, really strong open markets. And so you have a situation where I think you've had some frustrating experiences on the manufacturing side, but to give those up for, agriculture interests, as we're seeing, it's going to be hard. And I think it's really a challenge for the government, whether you're the president or whether you're a member of Congress who represents a state or a district that is heavily dependent on trade, to balance the issue of winners and losers versus the fact that there is a perception, I think, out there among a lot of workers that the benefits of global trade have not been evenly and fairly distributed in the United States.
Mr. Wise, maybe you can help me out with something here. I'm a little confused because I'm old enough, and perhaps you are old enough to remember violent demonstrations against the WTO a few years back, both on this continent and overseas, and it was from a leftist perspective. And now you have really the Democrats in Congress who are defending the WTO, and the Republicans who are more or less the party of free trade, actually coalescing behind the president's protectionism, or it could be construed as protectionism. What's going on? Do I need a scorecard to keep track of this?
It certainly feels that way. I mean, the politics of trade right now are really, really interesting. I mean, obviously, as you say, Republicans historically have been the party of free trade and low tariffs, and then along comes Trump and essentially turns the party's position on its head overnight. Democrats have long been skeptical of free trade, but, with Trump claiming that ground, as you point out, some Democrats are moving more towards free trade and sort of stressing the importance of economic connectivity with the rest of the world. And I think what we're going to see here over the next few months as the sort of small-scale trade wars that we've been seeing with Canada and with China start to heat up a little bit, I think you're really going to see some big decisions have to be made by both parties as they look towards November and to figure out how do we sustain this position, or can we?
Also, the other thing that I always thought was the Earth is, the world is getting smaller, and we are more interconnected than we've ever been. What is going to break this impasse? What in your mind needs to be done in order to get to a place where global trade is accepted?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's certainly something that if I were thinking about running for president in 2020 as a Democrat, I would really be thinking hard on right now, because we cannot afford to withdraw from the world, but by the same token, we still have this perception problem that, if the benefits of trade are not being felt across the entirety of the economy, then what's the point? And should we be, taking more of a Trump position? And I think a lot of congressional Republicans are also dealing with this right now, really thinking hard about both what they've historically believed in and also the sort of populism that the president has really tapped into. And obviously we've seen in other elections this year, the cost for Republicans in their primaries of going against the president can be pretty high, as we saw in South Carolina with Mark Sanford and some other folks this year.
Thanks very much for being with us. James Wise is the Senior Vice President for Haidt Consulting Group in Washington. You can follow them online at Haidt LLC, talking about the potential for the U.S. to withdraw from the World Trade Organization.